Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we got something special here. We're going to be looking at building this Meteorite Pepsi GMT. To get started, we're going to need a few components. First off, a case. Second, a bracelet. We're going to need our Pepsi bezel. Very important is our Meteorite dial, our handset, GMT hand, and last but not least, our movement. We're going to be using an NH34 for this build. So let's get started. Like I said, we're going to use an NH34 movement for this build. I'm going to start by uncasing it and placing it into our movement holder. And screwing it down tightly so that it can't run away on us. Next part is a little tricky. We have to remove the dial washer from the bag. I struggled a little bit here, so I used the pliers to help me get the bag open and remove the dial washer. As you can see, this is a very thin, small washer that can easily be lost, and it goes right over the 24-hour pinion under the dial. Next may be the most important aspect of the build, the Meteorite dial. What's cool about Meteorite dials is that no two are the same. That intricate pattern seen on the dial is what's known as a Woodmanstatten pattern or Thomas structure. In order for this pattern to form, molten iron and nickel need to be mixed together and cooled over millions of years. As the iron and nickel cools, taenite can form and solidify. Given enough time, however, the nickel can diffuse out of the taenite and form kamacite, which will continue to grow at a very slow rate. For Woodmanstatten patterns to be visible, the meteorite must first be cut and polished, and then etched with a weak acid. Alright, enough science. Let's get back to watch building. What you just saw was me chopping off one of the feet on the dial to get the right alignment for the date window. I'm gonna come back here and get the other one. We're just gonna check everything still lines up and looks pretty good. Next, I'm going to move on to filing down the little excess nubs from clipping off the dial feet. This took me a little bit of time. I barely put any pressure onto the dial. I've been told Meteorite's pretty brittle. I've only worked with it a handful of times, and it's pretty expensive, so I didn't want to rebuy a Meteorite dial. Some more information while I work to file these nubs down flat. It's publicly known that Rolex uses the Gibeon meteorite for its dials, which was found in 1838. I, however, do not know the origin of my meteorite. My best guess is it's from a meteorite discovered in 1906 known as the Monulalusta meteorite. Looks like I got those little nubs flattened out. Gonna clean off the workspace real quick. Get the movement back in the center. Line my dial up, making sure that that date window's in the correct space. And then gently but firmly press it into place. So now we're on to the fun part, setting the hands. Gonna click in the crown stem real quick and give the watch a bit of wind here. Want to make sure it has enough power to flip the date when we need it to. Now that we've got some power on the watch, I'm going to pull the crown stem out to the hand setting position. And just going to turn it over and over and over again until that date flicks over. As you can see, it's just starting to creep over here, and boom, it flicks over. So with the watch now at midnight, we can begin setting the hands. First off is the GMT hand. I like to turn my movement 90 degrees when I'm setting the hands. Just makes it a little bit easier for me to tell when everything is lined up perfectly. So I've got that GMT hand placed where I want it, lined up with the 12 o'clock marker. Gonna get the hand setting tool out, using the gray side, push it into place. And as always, we're going to check for clearance by rotating the GMT hand all the way around the movement. And we want to also check that the date clicks over right at 12 o'clock. You can see I got the hand setting tool back out. When I was checking for clearance, I noticed that the GMT hand was sitting at a pretty steep angle and was pretty far off the markers, so I'm just using this tool to push it down a little bit closer. This will ensure that the hour hand has enough space to move freely once it's installed. So with the GMT hand now in place, we can move on to setting the hours, minutes, and seconds hands. So just going to place the hour's hand on its pinion, get the tweezers out to make sure it's seated properly, and then nudge it right into place so that it's lined up with the 12 o'clock marker, being careful not to move the GMT hand beneath it. I was able to get it lined up pretty quickly this time. Again, I'm using the hand setting tool with the red tip this time to press it into place. Once again, checking for clearance, making sure the GMT hand doesn't strike any of the markers, and that the hour hand doesn't strike the GMT hand. And we're looking good. Looks like the date flicks over right around 12 o'clock. Moving on to setting the minute hand, you can still see I'm using plastic tweezers. I don't know if the dial would get damaged if I was to scratch it with metal tweezers, but I'm not here to take any risks. Again, I lined up the minute hand pretty quickly, got out the hand setting tool, and again using the red side, just pushed gently down onto it to set it into place. Again, here we're just checking for clearance and to make sure that the date flicks over right at 12 o'clock, which it doesn't. Flicks over 9 minutes too late. Yeah, that's not going to fly. So, with a little manipulation of the movement and readjusting the hands, we're going to take another stab at this. And this time we get it to flick over right about 12 o'clock. That's better. Sometimes that can be a tedious process. There's been times before I've had to set the hands 3 or 4 times just to make sure that the date flicks over right around 12. Alright, moving on to the seconds hand now. Been having some pretty good luck setting the hands. Let's see if that continues and we can get this in one shot. I cannot get it in one shot, so worst watch builder ever. Here you can see my coiffed hair and my loop making an appearance into the video. I think the loop is 15 times magnification, so should make it a little bit easier to get this thing set. Quick check there to make sure it's roughly on the post it needs to be before pulling the crown stem back out, and here doing the final press to get it set. And of course here, doing one last check for clearance, making sure none of the hands are going to make contact with each other, and making sure that GMT hand doesn't hit any of the markers on the dial. Alright, we're done with the movement for now, so we can move on to looking at the case. And I had quite an adventure getting a case to work for this build. I'm sure some, if not most of you, know that the genuine Rolex Meteorite Pepsi GMT comes with a full white gold case and bracelet. Now, obviously the cases and bracelets I use for these builds are made of stainless steel, but thinking that this was going to be a special build, I decided to send a bracelet and a case off to a guy in California who specialized in gold plating. Now, would anybody like to hazard a guess at how much it cost me to have a case and a bracelet, white gold plated, to look similar to the Rolex white gold? Go ahead, think your number. It was $230. Now, I'm not upset about the price of the service by any means, but what I am kind of peeved about is once I get everything back and I was test fitting it together, nothing seemed to look correct. The Meteorite dial was too gray, or the plating was a little bit off, or the dial and the bezel didn't look correct. Nothing was working for me. I made the decision that a stainless steel case would probably look a lot better. However, that was my last one, and now it was white gold plated. And while sourcing a new case, I found that a different store offered cases with bi-directional bezels. This is good because one of the longest parts of these builds is taking apart the bezel assembly to get that little click spring out and file it down to turn a unidirectional bezel into a bidirectional bezel. You can actually see this process going on in the background right now. I've removed the retainer spring, got the bezel off, and between my fingers I have the little click. I'm going to get a Dremel out and file that down just enough so that the bezel can slide over it in both directions. So with the hopes of saving myself from having to do this step, and the possibility of having a more tactile bezel feel, I decided to order that case with the bidirectional bezel. So now you're saying, wait a minute, I thought you said you had a case with a bidirectional bezel. Why are you doing this step? Well, because after I finished placing the hands on the movement, I put the movement in the case and noticed that the second hand made contact with the crystal when the case back was fully tightened down and the movement was in place. Now this probably occurred because that case is made for NH35 or NH36 movements, however I have an NH34 which is just slightly taller. Luckily I was smart enough to buy a case from a store I've bought cases before from that I know work with NH34 movement. So now that I finished ranting about my various misfortune with cases, you can see I'm just about to complete putting the bezel assembly back together. I have the little retaining spring now, and I just need to push it into place all around the outside. So with that bezel retaining ring now in place, we can work on opening up the case. And my girlfriend gave me a little bit of a hard time last time for not using this rubber ball to open up the case back, so I had to make sure it made an appearance this video. Just doing a quick cleaning of the case here with a microfiber. Don't want any dust on the inside or the outside of the case when we start putting the movement in. In addition to the microfiber, I just like to use this little handheld blower just to help me blow any bits of dust out. So now we'll start to see the build come together. Gotta remove the crown stem by pushing down the little lever. That frees it out, pull it right out. Do a little bit of reorganizing. Put the movement on the pad. Put the case over the movement. Doesn't need to be lined up perfectly, just need the case over the movement. Then we're going to flip everything over, and the movement will now be seated in the case. I'm going to press down on the dial holder that's attached to the movement just to make sure it's seated properly within the case now. So I've unscrewed the crown that comes with the case, and I'm going to take the crown stem that comes with the movement and screw the crown onto the crown stem. Screwing it down all the way here. I want to make sure I get an accurate reading on my calipers. And here I'm pushing the crown stem back into the movement, twisting ever so slightly. Having a little bit of a hard time here, so I got the tweezers out just to see if I can move the movement within the case to get everything perfectly lined up. And now I've got my calipers out and zeroed. I'm going to take one side and push it against the side of the case, and the other side against the back of the crown, and then I'm going to depress the crown. And just like before the movement was in the case, pushing down on a lever, I'm going to pull out the crown stem. I'm going to unscrew the crown from the crown stem. Taking the measurement we just got on our calipers, going to leave a little mark on where to cut. Using a nice strong pair of pliers, I'm going to cut right above the mark I just made. It's tempting to cut right on the mark, but I do not want to cut this crown stem short. And now breaking out the Dremel, just to knock off those burrs and try to round off the crown stem. So I've dremeled down the crown stem to a good length. I'm going to screw the crown back onto the crown stem, and I'm going to reinsert it back into the movement. So I've pushed the crown stem back into the movement. It went in a little bit easier than it did the first time. And now I'm going to screw down the crown just to make sure that the crown stem is cut to the correct length. So now I'm just doing a systems check on the watch, making sure that all the functions work as they should, and that nothing was fouled up while I was casing up the movement. Here I'm going to set the time to around 6 o'clock before pushing the crown stem into the second position, then rotating counterclockwise. We'll change our date. And if we leave it in the second position and rotate the crown clockwise now, we'll jump the GMT hand. Everything looks good, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten the crown back down. So everything's good with the movement. Gonna case it up, Get a second dose of the yellow rubber ball. Before really tightening down the case back with this case back tightening tool. It's important to apply a good bit of pressure here because you don't want it to slip out. Worst watch builder ever, strike two. Luckily there wasn't any damage to those teeth, and I was able to tighten it down fully with just one more turn. The hands, dial, and movement are all cased up now. We're going to move on to the bezel, and we'll start to see what we're really working with. Of course, I'm using the same blue and red ceramic Pepsi bezel as the previous build. Just lining it up here before I press it into place. And there we go, everything's lined up, pressing it into place now. Gonna give it a couple spins just to make sure everything still works. The case is looking good, and I'm happy with the feel of the bezel. So now I'm going to move on to getting the bracelet attached. I'm going to start here by removing a screw just to make it a little bit easier on myself. Here I'm going to flip the case over, still leaving it on the pad to protect it. I'm going to put a spring bar through the end link and then put that all on the edge of the case. Get my spring bar tool out, pinch those together and push it down into place. Looks like I was able to get the spring bar between the two lugs, but it's not seated properly. So I'm going to get out my tweezers and just pop it into the little divots made for it to sit in. With that side done, it's just rinse and repeat on the other side. That side went in first try, so now all I have to do is line up the links on the bracelet, put the screw back in, and we're done. And there she is, our NH34 Meteorite Pepsi GMT. This build's been a long time coming and one I've wanted to do for a good while now, so I'm glad to finally see it come to fruition. I'm really happy with the way this one came out. The way the light dances off the dial is a nice touch. It's a shame we didn't get to use the white gold plated case, but I do still think it looks better just in stainless steel. Gonna throw it on wrist here for the first time in 1 second. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Follow me on Instagram at Golden State Watch Shop. And if you're looking to commission a piece, I'd love to work with you guys on a future video. Go ahead and send me an email at goldenstatewatchshop@gmail.com. Gonna end the video with some shots of the watch out in the natural sunlight. Thanks for watching.